Hello, friends, and welcome to the Clueless Filmmakers podcast, the show for amateurs by amateurs, spreading the good word of making mistakes and not knowing what you're doing until you're suddenly doing it right. Thank you so much for joining us this week, even though, we haven't been too consistent lately. You might have noticed, if you're watching this, that, hey, you're watching this instead of just listening to it. We're doing a little bit of an experiment, and we're filming this episode. So yeah, enjoy that. If you're just listening, maybe you should go over to YouTube and check it out. It's pretty sweet. We got an awesome kind of blackish weird background, and we look awesome.
It's very 60s, just
very
kind of gothic 60s,
I'm pretty excited. So hey, I of course am your host, Weston Cross. Who else do we have here today?
My name is Scott Salvesen. I'm kind of all over the place. I'm currently a student at Utah Valley University. I've done quite a bit with film, actually. I'm actually a novelist and a screenwriter. I have one published novel, and I also have written some full-length scripts, some full-length screenplays, and I just actually completed a documentary about a local rugby team. So
nice.
Cool. That's what I do.
Right down. Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tanner Gillman, and I was once forcibly removed from an old folks' home from eating all their funeral potatoes. Those are my credentials.
Oh, awesome.
No, all right, we enter with that.
I'm gonna enjoy this.
The room is sizzling. All right, I'm an actor and a screenwriter myself. You may recognize me as guy number 7 from the Pizza Hut selfie stick commercial, which, of course, went viral. 4 million views. People recognize me. No, they don't. Yeah, and I just I'm happy to be here, doing this with you.
Awesome.
That's all.
And this is Matt Seamers, and I just graduated from the film program last week at BYU. So, trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life.
Fantastic. That's so inspiring, Matt.
Yeah.
So hey, we have a interesting podcast episode for y'all this week. We are talking about what I am calling, maybe other people call this, quote unquote trash films, or maybe our guilty pleasures. Those films that may not live up to Oscar status in any way, shape, or form, but somehow we love, or some people love. Maybe not everybody loves. But they find special places in our heart, despite of, or perhaps because of, their inherent flaws. First and foremost, what I kind of want to talk about was this weird phenomenon going on right now. The latest Fast and Furious film, Fate of the Furious.
Number 27 in the franchise.
It's getting, that sounds about right. I think it is. We're now featuring Vin Diesel's great grandson in the film. I believe it's the eighth film, right? Yeah, eighth.
Yeah.
They've been making a lot of these, and it in the box office has just dominated. Didn't it? I believe.
Broken all the records for opening, hasn't it?
Yeah, for opening weekend, I think the only kind of big record it hasn't broken has been like all time. Which, no one, if you adjust for, inflation, no one will ever beat Gone with the Wind, probably.
Blue Pocahontas.
Or probably won't beat Avatar. Maybe it will beat Avatar. We'll see. Yeah. Oh, man. That movie. I almost want to put that in the trash film category, too, personally.
It rides the line between, schlock and actual good movie. Yeah. Avatar does. It's such an interesting creature.
Yeah.
Story's crap. The visual effects were mind-blowing, but it's on that border.
I will say the whole Pocahontas argument, I totally get it, but that's every movie borrows from something, and I think that was an interesting route to go, was blue creatures in space. But I think that if you're gonna go with a story to tell that with, it's Pocahontas. It works.
Yeah, but Pocahontas was a great story. John Smith was an awesome guy.
It's also the most racist movie that Disney's ever released. But
Song of the South.
Oh, well, I mean, in recent memory.
Well, anywho, I went and I watched Fate of the Furious last night. I will admit that it was, I might have only done it because of this podcast. But I can absolutely see those stunts and so much to it. But there was a ton of it that just bugged the heck out of me because at times it honestly felt like a straight up action movie parody. Like there were lines that they're dropping and I'm like, I could see Leslie, what's his bucket? The comedian that's dead now.
The one dead guy.
Guy from Spy Hard and
Oh, Leslie Nielsen.
Leslie
Yeah,
Nielsen.
Naked Gun.
That's right.
Okay, I
Yeah,
know what you're talking about.
Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could totally see him
Okay,
seeing
yeah.
some of those lines. Anyway, however, I know. I mean, obviously, people are loving this. I have y'all particularly here because y'all have opinions about this, and y'all enjoy the franchise much more than I do, and I want to understand what the appeal is to this.
Well, to me, I started watching these films. I remember the first time I ever saw one of the Fast and Furious films. It was actually the second one.
Ooh.
I just had an appendectomy in a third world country, and I'm lying in the children's ward in a bed that was too small for me.
Was that more enjoyable than watching the film itself?
I don't know. I
It enhanced
think I
the
was on morphine at
experience.
the time.
Too Fast, Too Furious on morphine is
That's not
ideal.
good.
But I mean, remember the first time I watched it, I was just chilling, and there was this 6-year-old in the bed next to me, and I'm just going, I hate my life right now, and I'm like, turn the TV on, and there's Too Fast, Too Furious playing on this TV, and so I watched it, and I've really been a fan of the films really ever since. And to me, I understand what you're saying. It's like stuff is bugging the heck out of you. I've actually not really been much of a fan of the direction the franchise has been taking.
Oh no, you're a dissenter.
Well,
It's fine.
I really feel like up to the fifth movie, including the fifth movie, I really felt that they stuck to a structure that was working.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like the outlaws running from the law, and up to the end of the fifth movie, it was based in relative realism. The stunts were, especially the first three films, the stunts were actually performed. These were actual drivers performing. It was fundamentally about racing and being
They wear
rebel.
helmets in the first one when they're doing the heist.
That's
they have
right,
not
they
worn
did do
helmets
that.
in any of the other
They
movies
actually
since.
wore helmets.
They did. Like when they're
Okay.
hopping on the
'Cause
truck, they're
I
like
haven't
wearing
seen the first
protective
one,
gear, and
yeah.
it's like Vin Diesel does not wear protective gear in Furious 8.
and going back to that, I really feel like the first 5 films were grounded in that realism of I'm a rebel, I'm here to do what I want, but at the same time I have to deal with the consequences of my actions. Vin Diesel, always constantly on the run, is putting his family at risk, and Brian O'Connor being the one who has to pick up the pieces from that, especially, and he makes decisions too based on he goes back to work for the FBI and ends up sacrificing that career to help his family. But I really feel like the last 3, 6, 7, and 8 have kind of gone above and beyond what the franchise was really meant to be, and that it's turned into this pseudo Ocean's 11 type of thing with really fast cars. And like I said, up to about the 5th film, all the stunts and the story was grounded in reality. And after the last 6, 7, and 8, they've started to use the CGI. They've started to think, what can we do now? Let's drop cars out of a plane. Let's blow up a submarine and all these things.
Oh,
And
man.
I really feel like having those elements getting bigger and bigger has really hurt the credibility of the series, because up until really about, I think the plane incident in number 6, I think everyone was thinking, okay, this is something we can get behind. But I think as soon as the 28-mile runway came into the picture, it was over.
Yeah, that's. Have you seen the 8th?
I have.
Are
I
you?
have.
You have?
I've seen
Have
it.
you?
Yeah,
You have?
I
Okay, I know Matt has.
I have not. I'm
I
boycotting it.
offered
No.
to
Yeah.
take him with me last night. He's like, no.
Yep.
I apologize for interrupting you, by the way, which I just
No,
go
for
Weston
it,
to
no.
do. So.
I felt like they did a lovely job of topping, not quite topping, or at least matching the 28-mile runway with like the mansion of a plane. Like they have, this
so good.
like multiple master suites. There's like 200 armed dudes on it. There's a cell.
Still the craziest stunt I've ever seen in the franchise is the building jump, though. I'm like, what?
Yeah, and that
in,
was
like,
yeah.
was
Abu Dhabi
The
or
most,
wherever.
I think other than the plane runway, I still think the building jump was
It's
still the most out there ridiculous thing.
It's so funny because you said like, oh, that plane sequence, that action sequence, and I literally racked my brain because there were 3 of them at this point. Because I was like, plane in Furious 7 where they
crazy
literally
plane,
jump
yeah.
their cars out of an airplane to land on a mountaintop.
No, I'm
And
talking
you're
about
like, no, the
the one
plane
that ended on
runway,
number
and then
6,
you
yeah.
said the plane one in number 8, and I was like, was there? Oh yeah, Jason Statham flies with
I
Luke
love-
Evans
yeah,
into
they
a
got
plane to save a
jet,
baby.
The plane jet packs. Oh, that was so great. I do love because those things are actually real. Those plane jet packs.
Oh, yeah.
This is so cool. I kind of enjoyed that part.
I
But,
think.
I don't
Falcon
think they'd
has an
catch a
Avengers.
speeding.
yeah, I agree. I don't think that they would catch up to a 747 or whatever that plane was. Absolutely true.
If can I jump in with like my experience?
Yeah,
with the
please,
Fast and the
please,
Furious?
talk about your experience.
So you
franchise.
say you started with Too Fast, Too Furious. I think I started with what the opposite of what you want to do when you start with the franchise. The first one I saw was Tokyo Drift, which is like this strange outlier. And there was actually an interview with the producer who's produced all 8 films, and he was like, you either loathe Tokyo Drift or it's your favorite Fast and the Furious movie. And it's funny because I'd heard this franchise, and this was actually the summer, I think it was sophomore year, that Fast 5 was coming out. And my friend loved these movies. He was like, dude, like, you gotta watch Tokyo Drift. It's my favorite one. And I watched it, and I was like, okay, like, it's good. Like, it's a solid action movie, kind of hokey dialogue. The lead actor has the charisma of a potato. But, like, other
It
than
comes
that...
from the potato state.
Yeah, but it's like it was like a fun enjoy. I was like, okay, and I forgot about it like the next day, and then like I saw Fast 5 I think a couple years later, and I was like, 2 movies ago this was a completely different franchise. And I think that's what like is like the it's kind of become a cliche to say it, but like popular opinion is that like the first movie, The Fast and the Furious, is Point Break with cars. It's Point Break
Yeah.
with like
A lot of people upset. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, with like street racing. And then you get to like like the Fate of the Furious, the newest one. It's a superhero movie, and it's so funny because it's like you can
cars are the
start. It's a
superheroes.
superhero
Oh
movie,
my
and it's
gosh,
like,
you're absolutely
you
right.
You can start with, and it's funny because it's like this franchise has something for everybody. It has you prefer the earlier end of things. There's more grounded, and it's actually kind of people forget the initial movies were about Paul Walker. Like it was, we're about Brian O'Connor. It was his story, and then you get to these later ones, and it's like it's almost like so. The 4th one came out, which was like Fast and Furious. It was like some other play on the same 3 words.
Yeah.
And then it was like, but then after that, it's like Fast 5. Like, what do we do? And I actually put a Facebook status of this the other day where I said jumping the shark was the best thing to happen to the Fast and the Furious franchise. Because I totally get your opinion, but I'm on the complete other end of it where I'm like, this is the logical progression of where this show, this movie should go. Is because it's like it's so funny because it's like, I don't even know where to begin. But like, okay, so for example, Furious 7, I saw it a couple summers ago whenever it came out in theaters with my friend Cesar and my friend Case, who is like, he's very picky about what movies he likes. He's very particular, and he walked out of it, and like me and Cesar were like, that was so awesome. And then Vin Diesel stomped the concrete and it exploded, and it was so great. And he was just like, I don't understand it. And then he finally was like, okay, he's like, the point I knew what was happening, because he came in later, he saw another movie, wanted to see like the last 30 minutes of that, and he was like, the point where I finally understood what this franchise was is when when the Rock flexed out of his cast, picked up his pistol, and then shot a drone down, like with a submachine gun, and then like capped it 2 times in the face. And he was like, it's a parody of itself. And that's kind of what I think it is it's like, it's me and my brother-in-law were talking about it because he's like the biggest Fast and the Furious fan I know. And the Fast and the Furious movies are a joke that everyone is in on except for Vin Diesel. like he's like his writers, he gives his writers, he gives them $1 jillion, and he's like, all right, you got 3 months to make this the best story ever. Like, okay, so they're in a room and they're just messing around. You know, they're not doing work. They're playing video games, they're eating cheese puffs. And then he comes in like the day of the pitch,
this.
and they're like, crap, guys, what do we do? The boss is gonna be here. The perpetuator of this franchise. What are we gonna do? And he comes in. They're like, what did we do in the last one? They're like, I don't know. I think there was like a tank on a highway, and there was a plane and it exploded. And they're like, okay, we gotta outdo that. So he comes in, and they're like, he's like, what do you got for me? And they're like, we jump cars out of a plane. Also, we jump a car in between the tallest tower that Mission Impossible did last year. And he's like, will there be family? They're like, yes, Vin, there will be family. And he's like, good, it'll work. And then he leaves. And then like, how do we do this every time? How do we do this every time these movies happen? And it's like, and it's self-aware without being like obnoxiously so. Because like as a culture, we're embracing irony in a way that's like good, but it's also like sometimes my least favorite jokes in these kind of movies are like, wink, wink, remember when this was dorky? Or like, remember how dumb this plot line is? And it doesn't work. But with the Fast and the Furious, like, it just does. And it's like the weirdest thing because of it. Sorry, I talked way too much.
Oh, no.
That's my...
You actually brought up an interesting point that I think is worth talking about, especially since we are talking about quote-unquote trash movies, is the Rock phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
Because
he's in so much now, yeah.
He's been told... It's been said that the Rock... I don't know who quite said it, but someone said that the Rock is franchise Viagra. Because whatever he's in, people will watch.
Yeah,
He's the highest paid actor in Hollywood right now.
There you go.
Really?
Past Robert Downey.
RDJ himself.
Wow.
So, and I think that's an interesting point to bring up, because up until the fourth film, you know, the first one was this interesting cultural phenomenon that seemingly everyone saw and everyone was blown away. It's kind of like Pitch Perfect, you know. No one expected what they saw and were absolutely blown away by it. Then the second one happened, you know, you don't have Vin Diesel and you kind of have a kind of strange storyline. So actually the third film was supposed to be the last of the franchise before it went straight to DVD. But people, you know, like you said, either loved it or hated it.
Yeah.
And enough people loved it much that Vin Diesel was like, okay, let me buy into this. He actually secured the rights to the franchise, became the producer. Cha-ching.
Oh man, he's rolling
smart fellow.
Rolling in money. Oh my gosh.
And then the fourth film came out, and people were like, yeah, okay, like we these are familiar characters, we know what they're doing, but you know, okay. But then you have Fast 5, and The Rock comes in, and the whole game changes. Fast 5 is still considered to be the best one of the franchise, and which I'm inclined to agree with on a certain level.
That's the one The Rock came in on?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
first film that
I
The Rock
think
came
that's
in.
the first
And
one
he
that
was
I
actually the
actually
villain.
saw.
And he was it was interesting because he was the villain in this film. Like he was the guy who was
Well, kind of. I mean, he
kind of turns around at the
Antagonist,
end.
but like he was a cop, so he was a good guy. It was just like two sides. True.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. But it was an interesting phenomenon because like people freaking loved Fast 5. Like everyone was talking about it, and it was before the franchise started to get into the hokey stunts and everything. It was still kind of Ocean's 11-esque. You know, it was hoaxy at the end, but that's the idea. It was still grounded in reality. But then I think the direction that the franchise took that was probably the wrong direction was to make Dwayne Johnson the good guy and turn around and say, hey, by the way, in the last movie, I was chasing you guys and almost killed you. How about we be buddies and chase down this other guy?
Oh, I love it. I think it's magic.
But I mean, like, it was at Fast and Furious 6 was really the point where the stunts were just like, what did they just do? So, yeah.
Hey, remember when Fast and Furious movies were good and then they made 7 sequels?
Get out.
So I find these movies fascinating because I feel like fascinating. Because I feel like the first one is the only legitimately good one. And after that, I'm really surprised the franchise survived the second movie because it's just awful. I think that's the worst one. A lot of people, I mean, some people say Tokyo Drift, but I think the second one, it just, because it went from a legitimately good movie to just the campiest thing ever. And I'm really surprised that it survived. I think it's because, the franchise survived the first few movies because of the first one. People really enjoyed the first one, and that got us
and they were willing to
through
hang
the first
on,
few.
yeah.
And then, like you
Vin
said,
Diesel comes back.
and then we had this shift. Yeah, and then we get the original cast back, and people are like, okay, we'll give it another shot. And then since then, we've had this shift that we've already talked about. That being said, I mean, there is a place for movies that are over the top and spectacle, full of spectacle. And, yeah, but at the same time, I feel like this is a little bit like Land Before Time. Where I don't know how how many
my
sequels of that do
gosh.
they make? And they
They
just,
have announced that it will end with 10.
oh, okay.
Well, I thought they got past
No,
10.
no.
What?
Well,
They're like way
after
past
the
10.
7th one,
So-
I think did Vin Diesel say he wanted to do?
Oh, I
a
thought you were
So-
talking about
trilogy to
Land
end it?
Before
Oh no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
Land Before
I was like, wait, so
Time.
there's like
Oh, yeah.
Land
Land
Before
Before
times.
You know,
There
so-
are 10,
50.
10
I think
Fast
Vin
and
Diesel
Furious.
said
Okay.
after. I think Vin Diesel said after.
So 8 and
Seven.
9 were supposed to be. They were both approved right after 7, made a ton of money. So they were going to do 2 more.
Yeah.
Vin Diesel said that that was 8's actually the beginning of a trilogy. And the recent rumor is there's also going to be a new spin-off movie with The Rock, I think.
But there was that
So-
whole feud that was going on.
Yeah,
that
so
kinda
there's
killed
possibly another 3 movies coming out after this one. And I mean,
Yeah.
before like Fast 8 was even out, there was a possible, we're
Aren't
already.
you guys
But-
glad to
but
be
to-
Americans right now? Don't you just feel so blessed? I'm so okay.
Oh.
that. To be honest, that was really the best part about the Fate of the Furious was the banter between Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham.
It was pretty good.
It was like the greatest bromance of all time. They just want to beat the snot out of each
Yeah.
other, but they have so much respect for one another.
The classic will they, won't they? It was it was. I never thought I'd see the day where the best scene in the Fast and the Furious movie would be a prison riot.
It was
That
pretty
was
good.
my
really good
favorite
That
scene in
was-
this movie.
that
it was really well choreographed too. Like
That might be my
peop-
favorite too.
Yeah, people give like like it's always about the cars and the explosions, but like literally like with Dwayne Johnson just like throwing brothers.
Yeah, no,
off
you were talking you were talking about like there's superhero movies. Holy crap! Like
he gets hit by
like,
rubber bullets. He's
he-
just like
The Rock has turned
The
into a
Rock
boulder.
Yeah,
might
exactly.
as well have been Captain Freaking America in that scene.
So
like
it's really funny because my wife watched it with me and she remarked to me afterwards like, I've sat through all 8 of these movies with you. She absolutely hates them, and she's like, I sat through all 8 of these movies with you, and a lot of really unrealistic things have happened. But I think the most unrealistic thing I've ever seen was Dwayne Johnson walking into a room full of guys and they did not run out screaming like little girls.
It's true. There's this. So we obviously have a lot of differing opinions on this matter, and I think like one that's brought up a lot on the internet web sphere is just like people compare Transformers to the Fast and the Furious franchise a lot. And
It's a little unfair.
it's true. I believe that, but I see why people do it. They're both big dumb action movies. They make $1 billion each. They got like a lot of people behind them. But I think that like the difference, and I've tried to crack this down to a science, is that it's fun. Like that's the thing. Is that you talked about the plot holes, and I'm curious to what you're talking about, like how much of it made you angry, because I've now learned to watch these movies with this idea of like it doesn't matter. Like so a good example in this one is spoiler alert. I think you swore him off, so you're okay.
I'm okay.
But it's so Charlize Theron has like Vin Diesel under her control. She's like, I got your family. You're gonna do what I want. Me and my evil dreadlocks.
oh my
and
gosh,
Yeah,
they were like the trendiest, most woke group of hackers ever. That was
they were a bunch of
just
hipsters.
so ridiculous.
Yeah, there was one guy with like
her,
Johnson
and her
and Game of
nasty
Thrones.
blonde dreads.
There was one like 16-year-old hacker, and he had like one line, and I was like jarred by it because I was like, "You're like 15 years old, and you have piercings and like One Direction hair. What are you doing
That
with
was
this
so-
evil
they-
group of
they looked
mercenaries?"
so ridiculous. That whole ragtag team.
No, but like the whole concept is that it's like she basically like she has a thing that in Furious 7 is God's Eye, which is this thing that like sees every camera in the universe and can like hack into anything, and basically you're an invincible techno monster.
And Kurt
And
Russell's
so-
randomly around.
Because he's Kurt Russell and he can do what he wants.
Mr. Nobody. Yeah.
Captain America. But there's this scene where like Vin Diesel like has his like car, and she has like surveillance on him. Like there's one in the car. There's like she can hack anything, ATM machine, whatever. And this whole like concept of this scene, and it's fairly tense, is him to be like he fake breaks
know
down
exactly
his
where we're
yeah
going with
he
this.
fake. This is where I'm gonna get to that. He fake like breaks down his vehicle so he can like lift up the hood and block the camera, have a car pull up and like block him at the right time, so she thinks he's still behind the hood like working on his stuff. But he goes to talk to Helen Mirren to be like, can you Deus Ex Machina me out of this like situation I'm in? I was completely fine with that. There are about 8,000 plot holes that show up in that scene because it's like, okay, if she's constantly had him on surveillance, How did she not catch him putting the little thing in his car that stops his engine? How did she not? Because he had to call to make that meeting with Helen Mirren and be like, I need you to save me. She's like, he's been in a plane with her the whole time, like locked away. She knows what he's been doing. And thirdly, the guy who pulls up to like block his view is the same guy that he like gives a car back to in the beginning. He's like, I'm gonna change
In Cuba,
you.
it's this random gangster from
Cuban
Cuba
gangster.
came all the way to New York to back a truck
How
up
did
so he
he-
could block the camera
how did
for
he-
5 minutes.
How did he plan that? Being constantly like, he doesn't get away with anything with Charlie's. Like, that's very well established. That like, you can't do anything. Like at that point, with like that far stretch of imagination, he could have probably like left the plane with his child and his former cop lover, and like been like just gotten away with it. But it doesn't matter. Yeah, Thor's wife. But the point of the scene isn't about that. It's about the tension you feel. And so in moments
It
like
is very tense.
that's the thing, is that it's like, I know what this film is trying to do. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief. And with other movies, that same kind of scene, I wouldn't have been okay with it. You know, like plot holes are an important thing to be like to be kept aware of. But in the Fast and the Furious, it just does it in a way where it's like, these are our priorities. This is a story we're trying to tell, and the rest of it you can just fill in the gaps. And like, it's the same thing when like the two Jason Statham and brother fly into the plane at the end. It's like this unhackable like super terrorist plane, and they just press a button. It's like the
that's
gates
true.
open.
They just got a remote control like garage door opener.
But you bring up another interesting point, is the phenomenon of Charlize Theron and Helen Mirren. If you think about it, everyone who was in the franchise up to about the fourth movie was nobody before this franchise. You know, Vin Diesel was randomly in Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, that's right.
He was.
That's his best performance too.
Paul Walker was essentially nobody before this, and we can go through all the list. I mean, there was Ludacris, that's about it. But it's very interesting that we're talking about these trash movies, but in The Fate of the Furious, we have Helen Mirren and Charlize Theron, both Oscar winners and both considered to be some of the greatest actresses of any generation ever. How did they end up in a movie like this if it's trash?
Because they know what real art is.
It's really interesting. I just got done with a Western genre class, and we talked about what makes a Western, and the original Fast and the Furious is easily argued to be a Western, especially in relation to the idea of this code of honor that they live by. That's not necessarily society's code of honor, but it's theirs. That's straight out of the Western hero's handbook right there, living by this code of honor. And, and Paul Walker's character kind of picks it up along the way. And it's interesting because we've talked about them being superhero movies now, which also could be argued to be Westerns in a sense. And we've kind of started with this Western movie with cars, and we've kind of evolved into these superhero movies that just make a ton of money.
Oh man.
And I find it fascinating because I don't have an issue with cheesy movies so much, but the issue I have with Fast and Furious is that they are making so much money. I feel like they're gonna push a lot of other projects off to the side, because nobody's gonna want to
Well,
spend
just
money
remember
on them.
Twilight
That
made
is-
money.
Yeah, that's true. Because you have sorry, I just lost my train of thought. We were talking about it being kind of like an Ocean's movie, and I thought I've found it very funny that they keep adding on these big celebrities each movie, but they never get rid of them. And so each movie,
They had to kill Paul
cast.
Walker to get rid of his
the-
character.
it's funny
soon.
that
Too soon.
God rest his soul.
yeah,
Sorry.
this
R-
cast
R.I.P.
just keeps
Paul
getting
Walker.
bigger and bigger and bigger, and their budget's just gonna keep ballooning. But they're making money, enough money that it doesn't
They
matter.
can enough money
But
to
like
bring in
once
anybody
somebody's
they
on
want.
in the franchise, they don't
They
leave.
don't leave.
That's kind of like, because people a lot of the time bring up like the whole Avengers thing, and it's like people are like, man, don't you just want the X-Men and the Avengers? I'm like, no, I don't. There's so many. They can barely like form a. And that's the thing, is that it's like I'm fine with these shared universes. I'm a fan of all types of movies. I love my blockbusters. I liked Iron Man 2. That should show you where my sense of quality is. But like, at some point, I do agree with that you have to like maybe sacrifice star power for the sake of a coherent story. So.
Well, George Lucas did that when he made Star Wars. Speaking of Star Wars, you think about it. You think of the original trilogy, considered one of the greatest trilogies, if not the greatest trilogy of all time, according to some people. But if you think about it, his stars, Mark Hamill was nobody. Harrison Ford was his carpenter. And
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah, he was.
He
really
was,
cool.
he was, yeah, he just got, it was random. We got
And
it.
Carrie Fisher is the daughter of a famous Hollywood figure.
Debbie Reynolds, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Carrie Fisher, the only reason she was really in the film is because Debbie Reynolds was like, "Hey, you want to give my daughter a job?"
Well,
And-
Gary Kurtz was instrumental in that. He kind of put her in front of George Lucas,
And
the producer.
I mean, the point is what you're making is, there is a fine line between having the star power, because like you said, the very first films, the first few films are considered the first one specifically is considered really good, but it was made up of nobody stars, and they keep adding and adding star power, and the films don't necessarily get better and better.
Right. It's interesting. This is a Josh Contour thought. We were talking about this the other day. So I'll give him credit for this idea, but he noticed that we basically now go to movies for spectacle and we go to television for story,
Yeah, a lot of ways.
It's easier to make story on
which
TV.
used to be kind of the opposite, because television used to be all just episodic. At the end of your half hour, everything's wrapped up nicely. And now it's all serialized. So you have Game of Thrones, you have Breaking Bad. Anything coming out now is serialized, so you have to see every episode leading up to the current episode. Otherwise, you're going to be lost. And but that's really cool because that was one of my things I didn't like about television for a long time, was that it was just kind of the same thing over and over again. And now we're branching out into these really great stories, and we get really in depth with the characters and the stories. But film is shifting away from that. So now we go to movies for the spectacle.
Honest Trailers has a joke about that, where it's a Game of Thrones Honest Trailer, and he's like, in a world where television has replaced movies as the medium for grown-ups. That's my favorite joke.
It's also another phenomenon.
I will say stuff like, just really quick, because we got to start wrapping this up. I'll say this earlier. I felt my final thought on the film is, while I enjoyed so much of it, I felt like the Honest Trailer and how it should have ended things like pretty much wrote themselves as I'm watching this. I'm like, there's just, I feel like there's the epic voice guys would come on and be like, you know what? Just here's this line. They said this. This other thing, they did that. You get the joke. That's it. Anyway, we have to wind things down. As always, we want to end with an awkward story. Z, we have a relatively quick awkward story they would like to share with our audience.
Does it have to be recent?
No. Anything at all. Anytime.
Okay. Sorry for talking so much, by the way. I thought we had an hour.
No.
Okay.
No, we, yeah.
So this one time, I came on this podcast with my friend Weston Cross, and I was like sitting there by the microphone, and everyone is introducing themselves, and I was like, I'll be self-deprecating and make a joke about how I was kicked out of an old folks' home for stealing funeral potatoes, and it'll really kill him. That'll get him. And I was like, I made that joke, and everyone was like, oh, that was really awkward. Why'd you say that? And I was like, oh crap, man, what am I gonna do? I got to redeem myself for the rest of this podcast. And then I talked the whole rest of the time, way too much, and then I never got invited back again.
Okay, good story. Good story. Oh, I thought that was funny. And when you did that,
That was funny.
I
Thank you.
giggled at the joke. Anyway, that is our time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you're watching, thanks for watching. Tell your friends. As always, you can hit me up on Twitter, talk about the podcast, tell us what you like to see, what you like us to talk about, using the hashtag CF Podcast. Again, that is also shared with the Cystic Fibrosis Podcast, but we're more popular than them. They don't need the extra stuff, so just feel free to use that hashtag as much as you want. Also, you can hit me up personally on Twitter. Otherwise, my Twitter tag is at Weston_Cross. That's Weston with an I. Do you have a Twitter or anything?
Just at Scott Salvesen. My last name is very hard to spell, so it's Salvesen. I'm told I'm entertaining on Twitter, but I don't go on that often.
You have Twitter?
Oh, I do. Hi, I'm Tanner Gillman. It's at Tanner Gillman. I'm very creative. Thank you.
And I'm at MR Seamers.
Have you started using your Twitter yet? I don't think I've seen you post anything since
I
we
hardly
started
ever
doing
use
this.
it.
You gotta do it.
But if people,
we gotta promote the show, Matt.
if people send stuff my way, I'll try and respond if I know.
Please, please talk to us. I think I've had 2 people so far use the hashtag that weren't me, and I'm lonely. Also, you can go on iTunes and leave a review because that's always nice. Anyway, thank you so much. We will catch you next time. Have a fantastic day.
Daddy's got to go to work.